The Holy Quran states, they ask you what you should spend in the way of Allah. Say, whatever wealth you spend is right, but the deserving ones are your parents and close relatives and the orphans and the needy ones. And whatever good you do, Allah indeed knows full well of it. Over the last few days I talked about a couple of different aspects of the government of Amir al-Mu'mineen Imam alayhi salam. And we talked about how the governance styles of Amir al-Mu'mineen made up the ideology of Alawi politics, which is based on justice, on equity and on fairness. And today inshallah I'll continue to talk about this, but more specifically on the concept of wealth distribution through the welfare state, which was enacted by Amir al-Mu'mineen. But before I go in to discuss that, it needs to be asked what the welfare state means. If you look in the Oxford Dictionary, the welfare state is a system where the state or the government seeks to protect the health and the well-being of its citizens, especially those in financial or social need, by means of grants, pensions and other benefits. And what we'll find out is today, if the concept of a welfare state is something which is an Islamic concept, which is found in Islam, and if it is something that Imam Ali alayhi salam cared about and tried to enact. So as I mentioned, the welfare state is when the state or the government looks to help those who are in need because they are poor, and it seeks to help them with economic benefits, whether that is with pensions, whether that is with job seekers allowance if they don't have a job, or if they have children, to give them credit for their children. But is this an Islamic concept? Because as you know, this is in the government in this country, it is in the government in most Western countries as well as in Islamic countries and Arab countries. Is it something which in Islam has been promoted or talked about? Or is this the Islamic system of economics? Is it something which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Rasul came and ordered for us to enact when we established our own governments? And the answer to this is yes. The welfare state is something which is found in Islam. Shaheed Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr, in his book called Towards an Islamic Economy, he says that Islam and Rasulullah had the answers to the production and the distribution aspects of the economy and of the society, and that Islam and Rasulullah established the basis for Islamic social economic policy. He also says that the economy in an Islamic society has everything to do with Islamic ideology and theology, including the concepts of economic justice and fairness. And what this means, because it's quite difficult to understand, this means that the welfare state, or when the government helps out the citizens in a country with money, with benefits, this is something which Islam has determined and has advised us is something which needs to be fulfilled. And of course, the welfare state plays a big role in Islamic economics, which is a perfectly established system. And Islam condemns, and Islam does not promote the idea of anarchy or disorganization in a society. And that is why in the Holy Quran it orders Muslims to be organized into society and to build up institutions and establishments to help those who are in need. And it is in fact obligatory and wajib for an Islamic state and for an Islamic government to give good life and good harmony and social benefits to the people who are living under it. And this is why the Quran has stated that the mission of Rasulullah was to be a blessing for mankind. And this is one of the ways in which it is a blessing for mankind. And as we know, poverty or being poor and being in a state of poverty is something which unfortunately leads to sins in Islam. It leads to diseases of the heart. For example, if someone is so deep in poverty they do not have the money to fund themselves and to give themselves a good life, they may unfortunately resort to stealing money in order to fulfill their needs. Therefore, because poverty can bring about sins for a person, it is necessary for the Islamic government to come forward and to try and get rid of poverty, or at the very least to give people a basis in which they can rely on and support themselves. Not just for social reasons to keep people away from poverty because it is difficult for them, but also for spiritual reasons to rid them of potential sins. And as I mentioned before, under the rulership of the previous three illegitimate caliphs, The distribution of the money which belonged to the public didn't take place in the way it should. Through Abu Bakr, through Umar, through Uthman, the way in which the money was distributed was not in the correct way. And as a result, poverty became much more widespread and there was an increase in the amount of people who were poor. However, it was the duty of the Islamic government under these people which they did not fulfill to ensure that these people living under them had a respectable standard of living for every individual who was unable to take care of his own needs and was in poverty as a result. Now, the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, declared that he whom Allah has made an administrator over the affairs of Muslims, but he doesn't care about their needs and their poverty, then Allah will also be indifferent to that person's needs and to his poverty. Basically, if someone has control over the Muslims in terms of he's in a position of power over them and he can determine their financial status and help them out, if he does not care about bringing them out of poverty, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not help him out when he is in need. So we established a welfare system as something which exists in Islam to alleviate the poor in society and to try and give them their rights and their needs as they are entitled to. Now, when Amir al-Mu'mineen became the leader and the ruler of the Ummah, his first and immediate attention was brought to the improvement of the administration of the state. So he did a number of different things. He checked for corruption and bribery, which was present, as we mentioned, during the time of Uthman, where leaders used to just give away luxury goods to those who they were friendly with and to their family. Imam Ali also made institutions, he made bodies, he made regulatory agencies which would determine how much people were entitled to get in terms of money. And he gave people equal opportunities in jobs and distributed the money evenly amongst them. Now, when we look at the trend of Imam Ali's economic policy, the way in which he dealt with the finances and the money under his leadership, he tried to struggle against poverty and he tried to get rid of it from the Islamic society at the time. And he created certain rules and certain guidelines which are very interesting in terms of if we want to create an Islamic government in our countries these days, about how we should treat Muslims living under them. The Imam says that hunger and poverty of a group of people is caused by what? By the rich people in society exploiting the other group and being open-handed with them. He says whenever a poor or destitute person remains hungry, it is because a rich person has denied him his share. People are not naturally poor, people are not naturally hungry. This, as the Imam says, stems from a lack of fair distribution of wealth and the exploitation of rich people over the lower classes in society. It is then the case that the Islamic government or the Islamic State is obligated to prevent the accumulation or people hoarding up wealth and money unfairly in their hands, which will only benefit the rich people in society. It does not benefit the poor, the homeless, for example. And if we get rid of the rich people taking up all of the money for themselves and not giving it back into society the way that it should, then if we do not manage to eradicate this system, the continuation of the cycle of poverty will be everlasting. Now, Imam Ali also led Kufa before, and even in that short period of time where he was leading Kufa, despite all of the clashes, the difficulties that he faced, and all of the problems that came about as a result, during his time period where he reigned over it, he said that in Kufa, all the people were enjoying ease and comfort, and even the people at the very bottom of the society in terms of their class, even the poorest of people, they enjoyed bread, they enjoyed food, and they had shelter over them from the sunshine, and they also enjoyed the water from the Euphrates. Under the government and under the leadership of Amir al-Mu'mineen, even the poorest people in society did not struggle. He provided everybody with the same extent and level of care and attention that they deserved. And did you know that Amir al-Mu'mineen was the very first person to introduce a budget system for collecting all of the money and for the expenditure, the spending of the money? He was the first person to come up with the system of distributing this. And every province, every governorate under him had a budget which he would then have to approve, and of course, being an infallible Imam, he distributed it perfectly. Now the Imam, when he was governing over, he wouldn't tolerate the poverty of anyone, as we mentioned. There's one story where he encountered and came upon a Christian person who had been exploited by the rich people, and as a result this Christian person was now poor. And because this man was old, he had been abandoned and no one was taking care of him. He didn't have any family, his neighbours would not look after him, give him any help. And when this happened, the Imam took it upon himself to go and provide for this man. He took it upon him to go and care for this man. There was an active effort to provide people, especially like this man, with a level of service and effort so that they would at least have some basic provisions. If we want to give the example a little bit more clearly about Imam Ali having a welfare state which he propped up, there's a narration which I read from Grand Ayatollah Hussein Nouri Hamidani, which talks about the encounter between an old poor person and Amir al-Mu'mineen. And the Imam had been given a regular amount of money to this poor old man from the public treasury. And one day, he was so upset by the old man's neighbours, the people who were around him who didn't care for him. And he said to those people, he said, you have employed this man and you have used him to the point where he is old and he is infirm, and now you refuse to help him. So this means that it's not just the duty of the government, the Islamic government, to go and provide help for people. It is the responsibility of every single person in the Islamic society, because as we know, Islam is not an individualistic religion. It is not a religion where one person thinks just about himself and he doesn't care about the rest of the community. Everyone has a role to play in helping others in the community and in the Ummah. And as I mentioned the other night, Imam Ali was not just someone who brought slogans and empty words. He would act upon these words as well. And as I mentioned, when Uthman ibn Hanif, one of the companions of Amir al-Mu'mineen, came to the Imam and he said, when you are helping just the poor people, you will not have the support of the rich people in the society. You will not have the support of the influential people in the society. And when he said this, and when he said, the poor people you're helping won't benefit you, they won't give you anything in return, Amir al-Mu'mineen said, I cannot allow the rich people in the society to exploit the poor people in this Islamic state and to run an unjust system of distribution of the wealth. He said, I cannot for one moment even tolerate this. This is public wealth, this is public money. It comes from the people and it must also go back to them. He said that the rich and the powerful people haven't created any wealth. All they have done is they have sucked it and stole it out of the poor people. And had all of this been private property, then I would have distributed it in the same manner. So far as the rich people deserting the Imam says, I'm glad that they deserted me. I do not want these type of people to be in my camp. These are not people who follow the Alawi methodology and Alawi politics. The Imam says, I know that these people, even though I help them secure their services, I know that they're unable to serve me and to help me in any way. But I help them because they cannot help themselves, and they are as much human beings as you are and as I am. And he says, may Allah help me to do my duty as He wishes me to do. The Imam comes and he says that these poor people are just as entitled, they have the same rights as the Imam has. And when Imam Ali says to Malik al-Ashtar, when he's talking about the different types of people that there are, he says that there are various classes and types of people. And then he comes to the lowest class of people, the poor. He says these are the needy people, the poor ones, those who have the right to aid and assistance. Imam Ali says that the poor people that are living under the Islamic government have a right to the money which is in the public treasury. These people have a right to it, which means they must be paid it. And with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is plenty for each of the classes. He says that each type of class of person has a claim upon the ruler to the extent that will set it right. And this means that people are entitled to payments and benefits from the government. So to conclude, we can see that from the last few nights when I talked about the government and the governance style of Amir al-Mu'mineen, we can see that he has set forward the perfect example of a government in terms of economic and social policy, especially when it comes to helping the less fortunate people in society. As we mentioned, Amir al-Mu'mineen tried to alleviate the poor people, and the people that he blames for poverty are the rich people in society who steal the money from the masses. it is then our responsibility to lead on from this and to continue this style of government if we are blessed enough to have a say in it. It is our responsibility to help those who are in need, to help the poor people in society. And there are lots of different organisations, alhamdulillah, these days that will help the poor people, that will help take people out of poverty and give them their basic needs. Some of these, for example, is Al-Ain Charity, the Zahra Trust Charity, and especially in this month and on these nights, Laylatul Qadr, tomorrow inshallah, it is important that we use these nights to donate as much money as we can to charity, to sadaqah, for example, and to aid the poor people amongst us as well. And this can even be to the extent of feeding them during the nights of Shahr Ramadan. Imam Ali alayhi salam offered different teachings on economic justice and methods of getting rid of poverty, which unfortunately is so common till this very day. Now what we should do is we should try our very best to try and show the same mercy and the same compassion that Amir al-Mu'mineen had to the less fortunate people, to the orphans, to the widows, and to the general people who are struggling these days. And by doing what we can to help the needy today, then we will have followed the instructions of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, and we will be striving inshallah on the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we'll be able to show the akhlaq, and we'll be able to spread the light of our Imam and of Islam as a whole, and we can be the means of change, especially when we're living in a country today where we have the most illegitimate rulers, where we have the most illegitimate style of government. And when we bring about this change and we fulfill our duty as Muslims who believe in a collectivist religion, then inshallah we can make a change. And we can make that change which the world so desperately needs. And to finish, I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have mercy on all of the mu'mineen and madhlumeen, and for all of the shuhada, especially in Gaza and in Palestine, and for the Hajj al-Shahabi. Please recite Surah Al-Fatiha after salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.